Her mother was asleep just one room away when a stranger walked into a 12-year-old slumber party holding a knife. He tied up her two friends. He placed pillowcases over their heads and told them to count to 1,000. And when they finally worked up the courage to pull the pillowcases off and untie themselves, Polly Klaas was gone, and so was he. What followed was one of the largest volunteer search efforts in California history, and ultimately, a case so consequential that it rewrote the state's entire approach to sentencing repeat offenders. This is Polly's story. This is Unsolved and Unforgotten. Tonight's case is widely credited as the first missing child case to circulate on the early internet, and it directly produced one of the most significant and most debated pieces of criminal justice legislation in modern American history. Everything in this episode is drawn from court records, trial testimony, and verified reporting through 2026. Polly Hannah Klaas was born on January 1, 1981, the daughter of Mark Klaas and Eve Nickel. By the fall of 1993, she was 12 years old, a seventh grader living with her mother in Petaluma, California, a small city roughly 40 miles north of San Francisco in Sonoma County. She loved theater and had recently played a lead role in an elementary school stage production. On the evening of Friday, October 1, 1993, Polly was hosting two friends for a slumber party at her Petaluma home. Her mother had already gone to bed in a nearby room while the girls stayed up playing board games. At approximately 10:30 that night, a 39-year-old man named Richard Allen Davis broke into the home and entered Polly's bedroom, holding a knife. To the girls, still playing games moments earlier, the intrusion initially felt so surreal that they briefly wondered whether it was some kind of prank. Davis tied up Polly's two friends and placed pillowcases over their heads, instructing them to count to 1,000 before doing anything else. He then took Polly and left. The two friends, once they judged enough time had passed, freed themselves and woke Polly's mother, who immediately called the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department. What followed was the beginning of a search effort that would, within days, become one of the largest volunteer mobilizations in California history, and would ultimately last 2 full months before producing an answer. In the hours and weeks that followed, law enforcement crossed paths with Richard Allen Davis on at least 2 separate occasions, without realizing his connection to Polly's abduction, encounters that, in hindsight, represent some of the most painful missed opportunities in the entire case. Approximately an hour after abducting Polly, Davis drove his car into a ditch not far from the search area. Sonoma County Sheriff's deputies responded to the scene, and Davis convinced them he was simply a sightseer who had run off the road. Because those deputies had not yet received the physical description of the suspected kidnapper that Petaluma police had circulated, they let him go without further questioning. A few weeks later, Davis was separately arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol in an unrelated incident. The officers who processed that arrest did not connect him to the composite sketch of Polly's abductor that was, by that point, hanging on the walls of police offices throughout the region. The case's decisive break came nearly 2 months later, from an entirely unplanned encounter far from any organized search effort. On November the 27th, 1993, a Sonoma County woman named Dana Jaffe was hiking with a friend on a mountain trail near her home when she discovered a man's sweatshirt, a pair of girls' red tights, a piece of knotted white cloth, and other items suggesting a possible crime scene. She contacted authorities. A former Petaluma police detective who responded to the scene immediately recognized the knotted white cloth as consistent with material used to gag Polly's friends on the night of the abduction 2 months earlier. Jaffe also recalled, for investigators, an earlier encounter from October when she had discovered a disheveled trespasser on her own property near that same trail. Records of that encounter identified the trespasser as Richard Allen Davis, connecting, for the first time, the physical evidence recovered near her home to a specific named individual. Police arrested Davis on November the 30th, 1993, initially on a parole violation related to his history as a previously convicted offender. It was not immediately clear to investigators that they had found Polly's abductor. The connection was confirmed through physical evidence. A palm print recovered from a bed frame inside Polly's bedroom on the night of the abduction was matched to Davis. When investigators confronted him with that match, Davis confessed. On December the 4th, 1993, 64 days after Polly was taken from her own bedroom, Davis admitted that he had strangled her only hours after abducting her and led police to a shallow grave near Highway 101 in Cloverdale, California, roughly 50 miles north of Petaluma, where her body had been buried beneath a pile of lumber. The confirmation of Polly's death, after 2 months of a search effort that had drawn national and even early internet-era attention, marked one of the most devastating conclusions among the missing child cases of that era, and one that immediately raised painful, unavoidable questions about how a man with Davis's criminal history had been free to commit this crime at all. Richard Allen Davis was born on June 2nd, 1954, in San Francisco, California. By the time of Polly's abduction, he carried an extensive criminal record stretching back more than 2 decades, including prior convictions for burglary, kidnapping, and assault. He had been paroled from prison only months before he broke into the Klaas family home, a detail that would become central to the public and legislative reaction that followed his conviction. The pattern that emerged in the following months' reporting was stark. Davis had cycled repeatedly through the California correctional system for years, receiving parole after parole, despite an escalating history of violent offenses, until, on his latest release, he committed the crime that would define the rest of his life and reshape sentencing policy for an entire state. Because of the intense pre-trial publicity surrounding the case in the Bay Area, Davis's trial was moved to Santa Clara County. Proceedings began in 1996. On June the 18th, 1996, a jury found Richard Allen Davis guilty of first-degree murder with special circumstances, specifically that the murder had been committed during the course of a burglary, a robbery, a kidnapping, and an attempted lewd act upon a child under the age of 14. Those special circumstance findings made Davis eligible for the death penalty under California law. On August the 5th, 1996, based on the jury's recommendation, the court formally sentenced Davis to death, along with 5 consecutive terms of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus a determinate term of 31 years for the remaining felony convictions. Mark Klaas, Polly's father, was present in the courtroom for the sentencing. He would later recall telling reporters, in the moment, that he believed the case was finally over. Nearly 3 decades later, he would reflect publicly on how far from true that turned out to be. Public outrage over Davis's extensive criminal history and the repeated parole decisions that had kept returning him to the streets despite that history fueled one of the most consequential pieces of criminal justice legislation in modern American history. In 1994, less than a year after Polly's murder, California voters and lawmakers adopted what became known as the 3 strikes and you're out law, which doubled sentences for a second felony conviction and mandated 25 years to life prison terms for a third felony conviction. Roughly 30 other states would go on to pass similar laws in the years that followed. The law also prompted broader changes to how California and other states tracked and broadcast information about missing children and suspected abductors across law enforcement jurisdictions. The law's legacy has remained deeply contested in the decades since. Supporters have credited it with contributing to declining crime rates through the 1990s and 2000s. Critics have pointed to its role in dramatically increasing incarceration rates and prison overcrowding across California, and to cases in which the law's mandatory sentencing structure produced sentences widely viewed as disproportionate to the underlying offense. In 2012, California voters substantially narrowed the law through a ballot measure, requiring that a third strike involve a serious or violent felony in order to trigger the 25 years to life sentence, a direct response to years of criticism regarding the law's original scope. In the aftermath of Polly's murder, Mark Klaas founded what became the Klaas Kids Foundation in 1994, dedicated to preventing crimes against children and assisting in the search for other missing children across the country. Over the following 3 decades, the organization played a role in mobilizing search efforts for numerous other missing child cases, including, years later, the disappearance of Sierra Lamar, a South Bay teenager who vanished in March of 2012. In 2024, after 30 years of operation, Mark Klaas announced that the Klaas Kids Foundation would close. He told reporters that everything the organization had done was meant to keep Polly's memory alive and build a lasting legacy in her name, framing her case as representative of any child in America who might go missing under any circumstance, and expressing hope that the organization's 3 decades of work had helped move the country toward better protecting and counting children like her. Richard Allen Davis remains incarcerated on death row at San Quentin State Prison. In 2019, California Governor Gavin Newsom placed a moratorium on executions statewide, meaning no one in California, including Davis, can currently be executed while that moratorium remains in place, though a future governor could reverse that policy. Davis's attorneys have continued to challenge his sentence in the years since. In 2024, they petitioned a Santa Clara County court to recall his death sentence, citing a change in California sentencing law that invalidated certain sentencing enhancements tied to prior nonviolent convictions. Polly Klaas attended the hearing, telling reporters afterward that he viewed the request, coming nearly 28 years after Davis's original conviction, as a continuation of what he described as Davis's contempt for the criminal justice system and for Polly's memory. The court denied the petition, and Davis's death sentence remains formally in place, even as the broader statewide moratorium on executions continues. If Polly Klaas were alive today, she would be 45 years old. Polly Klaas was taken from her own bedroom at knifepoint, while her mother slept only a few feet away and her friends waited, blindfolded, to count to 1,000. 2 months later, the search that gripped an entire state ended not with her rescue, but with a confession and a shallow grave beneath a pile of lumber. What Polly's case left behind reaches far beyond her own story. A law that reshaped criminal sentencing across California and eventually roughly 30 other states. A law that remains, to this day, one of the most consequential and most argued over legacies connected to any case in this entire series. If this episode helped you understand how one case changed an entire state's approach to criminal justice, please like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to Unsolved and Unforgotten for our next case. She is missing no longer.